The book that we're using is by Helen Joseph Armstrong. All of the editions are very similar. The most recent edition has a place to put your measurements in, and it has a little bit more information. Each of them have a little bit more than the previous one. But on this page in my book, it's blue, and the pages are spiral bound or something, I think, or it was before. I've been using it a long time. Anyway, my book, page 74, and in the white book with the black and brown, it's on page 84. So if you have that one, this is page 84, and it shows where the darts will appear if you slash where all the lines are. And then it also has broken down when you slash there, which way to fold the dart flap. So if you get confused about that, that will be on page 85 of the white book with the black and brown, or 75 in the blue one that's more expensive. So any dart that comes past the shoulder corner is going to go down, and it's considered horizontal. And any dart that's vertical is going to be considered vertical and fold toward the center, front, or back. So horizontal darts go down, vertical darts go toward the center. Another really great quiz question. Vertical darts toward the center, horizontal darts, the flap goes down. And you can find it in your book. This is where the book talks about how far away the bust point of the sewable dart should be from the actual bust point. In the book, for full scale, it says 5/8, which would mean half scale, you would make it 5/16. So that is subject to interpretation based on what's in style at the time. So anywhere between 1/4 of an inch and 1/2 an inch is going to be okay for your homework when you're looking at the distance from the bust point to the end of the new dart that I just had out. Where did I covered things up all the time. So the distance between here and here can be anywhere between 1/4 and 1/2 an inch. And my pen bled out and made it wider, which is why you want to use a nice sharp pencil. Speaking of, you can use colored pencil to go around the edge if you like. Just make it a different color so that you don't have too much ease. And the next page, 76 in my book, 86 in the white and brown and black book, shows using a pinwheel to mark the end of the dart instead of cutting it off with the scissors, and how to fold it. Most of the time this semester, I want to see darts that are filled in like this, rather than darts that are cut out and have seam allowance on the side. You can put seam allowance on them, but it makes them so that you can't alter them. It's more of a factory technique, or if you've got a lot of bulk, you may want to get rid of them that way. But this semester, let's reserve that technique for anything that comes out of the corner or a curved dart. And the rest of the time we'll practice this, because you can always go back to that. And if you need to alter your pattern, you can't if you've cut the dart out. So those are the pages that, in my book it's called chapter 4. In your book I'm not sure that it has chapters quite the same way. So start with page 83. All right, the next one. So I'm going to trace this on again. I know I'm not going to be putting this dart on the center front, so I'm just going to put it up to the edge of the paper. And I've found a slightly skinnier pen to trace it with. And I'll just go through the same thing, kind of push it up against the edge of the paper, trace around it. Can we see that okay? And I'm holding the paper down as I go and pushing slightly toward the paper, toward the pattern that's on the paper so that the pen stays there. And usually when you feel confident and just keep going so it's one smooth movement, it actually takes less time and it looks nicer. Okay, can't see that quite as well, can you? We may go back to the other pen. So this is where my bust point is. And this time, instead of putting it in the shoulder, we're going to do one in the neck, one in the armhole, one in the side seam. So by the time you're through, you'll have done 1, 2, 3, 4 different ones. And then we're going to do another version, a different way of making a dart in the shoulder. So we'll start with the one that goes in the neck. And some of the things that we're doing are important that you always have to do them the same way so that it fits properly, like putting in your right angles and your smooth curves and your seam allowance, and always rotating from the actual bust point. And then there are other things that are design choices. So when it's a design choice, I'll tell you, in the book it will always tell you exactly what to do. But if you learn the difference between a design choice and a fit requirement, then you'll know which things that you have to go by and which things you get to choose. So for this dart, as long as I do it between the edge, you can choose anywhere within that space to put this dart. You could come to the corner, but we'll do more of that next time. We're just doing kind of basic darts. So I'm going to choose a point on the neckline, anywhere between those two brackets, and I'm going to draw a straight line from my bust point to the neckline because that is a design choice. Where to put it is a choice. And eventually you'll get to the point where you'll be looking at a picture and you will try to make it look as much like the picture as possible. So I'm going to cut up this line and down this line again and close that and glue it down and go through the same process as last time. Cut two, but not through the bust point from both directions. And I need to cut it a little bit deeper because it's not quite moving right. You want it about 1/16 of an inch apart, and if it falls apart, that's okay. Just make sure you line it back up in the center. So that's what it's going to look like. Put glue on it. Bring it right up to the edge. Smooth it from the center out. I put it on the edge so that I'm going to leave room for my seam allowance, but I've got a nice big chunk for mending. This is the one where you want to use plenty of glue, not so much that it's sloppy, but plenty so that when you stick it down and try to fold it, it stays together. Center out. Nice and smooth and flat, not warpy. Okay, so measure the opening, and this one's smaller than it is in this shoulder. This one's only 2 5/8, so half of 2 is 1, and half of 5/8 is 5/16, so that's my center. Or you can fold a paper in half, draw a line straight through there, measure out 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch, anywhere between there. That just depends on what's in style, or if you're making a costume. Join those two. This one's going to look better because I don't have that fat pen bleeding, making a wider section than necessary. And I'll color in my E's so it's easier for you to see. This pen's just a lot tidier than the other one. Okay, there's my E's. So when I fold my dart, I'm going to come to there. And when I know my dart, well, this one would be a good candidate for seam allowance there because the flap is going to fold under and you're going to have a whole bunch of layers. So this one will be optional. You can either cut it so there's a flap inside, or you can add seam allowance. If you add seam allowance, I've been talking for too long. If you add seam allowance, it's going to be 1/4 of an inch out from the ease edge, not the inner edge. And I think the pen is bumping it out a little bit extra, so I'm getting more seam allowance than I would with a nice sharp pencil. But I'm going to fold this as if it's a flap. If you use it as seam allowance, you'll still add seam allowance, but you'll cut down into it. And I think we've got plenty of those on the website for examples. And you need practice making flaps. The main point is make it the way you're going to sew it. So if I'm folding a dart and putting a flap in, I'm going to fold it so that it's going toward the center front. So I'm going to use that line right there. I'll roll it away from me. Find the edge of the line at one end and crease it, and skip a section. Find the very point and crease it. Line the two up and crease it from the point out. Don't crease it toward the center, it makes it harder to fold. Then I'll bring the folded side to the flat side. When they're together, I'll mash the center down, and while they're folded, because I've marked the seam allowance on there, I can cut that off. And if you wanted to, you could also cut this off. But that is going to add bulk. And to be honest, if I was doing it that way, I would consider folding it the wrong direction and leaving more flap on the inside, depending on what kind of fabric I'm using. So that's what that would look like if you did it for a flap. And if you are doing it with seam allowance, I would cut one side to the point and then I would fold the one side over on the other to make sure that I got exactly a matching pair. I know when I just drew it, I didn't have exactly a matching pair. So that would be the seam allowance method, and that would be a lot easier to run through a factory. So they would come here, you'd put a notch right here at 1/4 of an inch, and then they would stitch down here. And in some factories, they'll put an actual hole through the fabric, they'll drill it down through all the layers, and if they miss, then you've got an exposed hole. So that's probably why you see a lot more princess lines and t-shirts. So you would add seam allowance the rest of the way around, knock down the center front, label this on the fold, put your name on it, glue it down, put it together, and draw your little picture, and this picture is going to look like this.